If you're a founder, investor, or corporate strategist, here's the challenge. Most startup leaders burn out in a few years, and so do their companies. Our guest today led a bootstrapped semiconductor company in Silicon Valley for 37 years, stayed profitable in 36 of those, and did it all without venture capital. Ray Zinn, the longest-serving CEO in Silicon Valley and the author of Tough Things First and The Essential Leader, built a people-first culture in one of the hardest industries in the world. Today, we'll break down 10 essential leadership fundamentals that investors can use to evaluate CEOs and founders can use to build companies that actually endure.
Welcome to Startuprad.io. Your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
My guest today is someone who quietly did what most founders only dream about. Ray Zinn is the co-founder and longtime CEO of Micrel Semiconductor, a Silicon Valley chip company he led for 37 years, making him the longest-serving CEO in Silicon Valley history. He bootstrapped in 1978, actually that's before I was born, with bank loans instead of venture capital, kept it profitable in 36 out of 37 years, and eventually delivered more than $800 million in equity value when Micrel was acquired by Microchip Technology. Along the way, Ray invented the wafer stepper, a key tool in chip manufacturing used around the world, and holds over 20 patents in RF communications and power regulations. He did all this while facing a personal curveball. After original vein occlusion left him legally blind around Micrel's IPO, he continued leading the company for another 2 decades. Ray is also the author of Tough Things First, his leadership classic on discipline and endurance, and most recently, The Essential Leader, 10 skills, attributes, and fundamentals that make up the essential leader, a roadmap for people-centric servant leadership geared towards building happy, productive, and loyal teams. His family roots go back to Dresden and Darmstadt here in Germany. He runs the Tough Things First podcast, and he's spent decades mentoring founders on how to build companies that last, not just companies that exist. Ray, it's a real pleasure to have you on Startup Radio, and sorry for the long introduction, but we had to say it all.
Yeah, no problem. Kein Problem.
Kein Problem. Very good. Let's talk a little bit about your family roots. They go back to Dresden and Darmstadt here in Germany, and you grew up as the eldest of 11 children on a cattle ranch before ever becoming Silicon Valley's longest-serving CEO. When you look back, which parts of that early story, family, ranch life, German heritage, shaped your leader you essentially became?
Well, it's interesting. When you're the oldest of 11, a lot of responsibility falls on your shoulders. There were no twins in our family, so each child came about one by one. And my parents were very loving, very focused on family values. So I grew up with strong culture, very, very strong culture. The importance of honesty and integrity were instilled in me as a very young person. So my father was also an entrepreneur. He was the owner of this called Zinn Brothers was the name of the company, but he was the founder, and he also ran it very successfully as an entrepreneur. We raised cattle, as you would, for beef, and that was the project, or the business plan was to take cattle at a very young age, 200 pounds, and raise them up ready for slaughter, as you would. So that's the kind of environment that I was raised in. My mother was a school teacher, so education was extremely important in our family. Also learning music. I learned to play the piano at the age of 5, and so very disciplined at home. My grandfather was aus Dresden. That's where he was from, so he was very, very disciplined. He even chewed his milk. I mean, he was so disciplined that he was he was viel Deutsch, as they say, very, very disciplined. And that helped as I grew up because my mother took on the kind of the German kind of culture and was very adamant about everything happening at a specific time. Eat breakfast at a certain time, lunch at a certain time, dinner at a certain time, going to bed at a certain time, getting up early and then exercising and doing all those things that that are what we call viel Deutsch, that's kind of the environment that I was raised in.
Hmm. Well, when you were speaking about being the oldest of 11 children, my brain was going, how big are your family gatherings then?
Huge, I lost my father at the age of 52 from an illness. And so I had to take on the responsibility of helping my mother raise 9 children. So that was another, you had to be very disciplined and very willing to help my poor mother, who was still raising so many children, and financially as well as helping her physically raise those children. And even though I didn't live that close, because I lived in Silicon Valley and she lived down in the Imperial Valley, which is just near the Mexican border in California, it was difficult because we didn't have Zoom in those days to be able to help her raise those children at such a. I was very young. I was only 26 when my father passed away, and so there were a lot of challenges. Because I felt my responsibility as the head of the family now, as you would, to help my mother. And I was married at the same time, and I had just had a young daughter. I had a baby. So my father passed away like 3 months after my first child was born. So anyway, very, very difficult times. But difficulty doesn't mean you're not happy and not joyful and not able to do things. You just have to look at the positive side when you're faced with challenges, and that's what we did. So the family grew closer together as my father passed away, because we had to resolve the business issues, and my mother had to go back to teaching school full time, and so I've always been around challenges. Nothing was ever smooth, as they say. It was always a challenge that I had to face in one form or another.
I see. You built Micrel in one of the hardest environments possible in semiconductors. Every day, chip companies live with brutal cycles, pricing pressure, and massive capital expenses, CapEx. From your point of view, what was the normal way most semiconductor CEOs approached leadership and culture when you started? And what did you see that you fundamentally disagreed with?
Sure. Well, you mentioned earlier how challenging semiconductors are. And it's a very challenging industry, and the reason is because it's so important. So goes semiconductors, so goes electronics in the world, and so when I track the economics of semiconductors, I can almost predict the GDP around the world and how it's going to go. And because it's so important, that's why we have these challenges in semiconductors, is because every country around the world needs them. Every country. So the differences between what I saw, well, let's first of all talk about a normal semiconductor company, and not Micrel. So a normal semiconductor company would seek venture capital. If you remember, Bob Noyce and Gordon Moore and that team from Fairchild left in 1968, I think it was 67, maybe 67, to form Intel. And Intel was formed by Arthur Rock, a venture capitalist. And so that was the first major foray, as you would, for semiconductors was when that group from Fairchild started Intel. So venture capital, there's a road actually, it's called Sand Hill Road in Palo Alto, where all the venture capital folks were, and that was just kind of the norm, was to go to Sand Hill Road and meet with a venture capitalist to start your company. And the average startup cost is around $50 million. It does take a lot of money to start a semiconductor company, by the way. So as I said, the average is around 50 million. And in the time frame of the 70s. Okay, we're talking about this. Because that's when most of them, Jerry Sanders and AMD and many others that started on their own, actually did so in the 70s. That was the big foray, as you would, in Silicon Valley, began in that time frame between 67 and 78 to 80. So, not much time, 10 to 15 years. And that's how it garnered its name, Silicon Valley, because there were so many startups coming out of that think out of that valley, which is near San Jose, California. And so I think that was almost like a major event in the industry, was the startup of so many semiconductor companies. I mean, 10, 15, 20 at a time. And they were all raising, $50, $100 million. So in 1976, I had just been, working on the wafer stepper, and my company that I was working for, it didn't appreciate the technology. For one thing, they didn't have the money. They didn't have the funding to be able to develop it. And so we got into a lot of arguments about how really viable that technology was, because it really didn't become a major factor until 10 years later, about 1986, 1987, is when it really took off. The primary reason is that I'm an inventor, and I could see the size of the wafers growing rapidly. A wafer is that cylindrical piece of silicon, not cylindrical, but like a disc shaped piece of silicon. We refer to as a wafer. And it was, maybe a few thousand thick and 2 inches in diameter. But let me back up a little bit. So when I started in 63 in semiconductors at Fairchild, the wafers were 3/4 of an inch in diameter, 3/4 of an inch. So that's like the size of a quarter. But then I could see the size of that silicon growing. And at some point, the current method of imaging the circuitry on that wafer was going to run out of capability, because not only were the wafers getting bigger, but the geometries were getting smaller. And so that's when I came up with the idea of the wafer stepper, which would then not be limited by the size of the wafer, because it was stepping along to image the circuit, as opposed to doing it in one fell swoop. We call it contact printing or projection printing. And so the wafer stepper was not limited by wafer size. And then also it wasn't limited by feature size, because we kept improving the lenses, the light sources, and the other capability of this equipment to be able to create these very, very tiny circuits. But the company I worked for, they just couldn't see that. They couldn't see the geometries coming down. They're working with IBM in East Fishkill on what we call E-beam technology, electron beam. And that's the IBM at the time was the big dog, as you would in technology, because they were the world's largest computer company. And so they thought the technology should be E-beam and not wafer stepping. And so the money and the emphasis at the company I worked for was to fund E-beam and not wafer stepping. And so as a result, we agreed to disagree, and I left the company in 76, June of 76. And then I tried to decide, what am I going to do? Now that I'm no longer employed, as you would, what was I going to do with my future? I love semiconductors. I love the technology. So I decided, excuse me, in 1978 to start a semiconductor company. But again, I'm a different kind of a guy. I remember in the wafer stepper, they thought that was a dumb idea. And for me to start a semiconductor company with no venture funding, they also thought that was a dumb idea. So I always did things that other people didn't think could be done. And so that's what prompted me to start Micrel without venture money, was because I wanted to own the company. I didn't want to have that shared with the venture capital people, because I wanted to do it my way. I got burned out because of the company I was working for. I had no say. If they didn't want to do the wafer stepper, then that was the end. So I was tired of people not having that vision that I could see. And so that's what prompted me to start my own company without venture funding in 1978. I had to change the business plan from making products to doing services, because the bank loan I had required me to be profitable from day one. And semiconductor companies don't become profitable until at least 5 to 7 years. And I couldn't do that. I had to be profitable from the very beginning. And so that's what prompted me to start my company without venture funding. And so it was 7 years later before I could start doing my own products, because I had garnered enough money. The company was profitable enough. We had enough revenue so that I could start designing my own semiconductor products. So that happened in about 75. And then, and we did pretty well. See, most semiconductor companies back in my time, went public after about 5 years or 6 years, because that's what the venture guys wanted. They wanted to get out. So, 5 to 7 years was kind of the average of these semiconductor companies going public. Whether they were successful or not didn't matter. These venture guys just wanted to get out. That wasn't capable at that point to go public. But by 1994, which was like, some 16 years later, we were able to take the company public. And that I didn't necessarily have to go public. I wanted to go public, but I didn't have to. We were profitable. We were able to create enough revenue and income to be able to fund the development of the company. I did it because I wanted to prove that a non-venture funded company could go public, and so I proved that point by going public very successfully in 1994.
I see. For everybody who's not familiar with inches, 3/4 of an inch are around 19 millimeters. And when you were talking about your former employer, Fairchild, I was wondering, did they ever regret their decision?
No, it wasn't Fairchild. Fairchild, that's a different story altogether.
Okay.
No, the company that I work for is called Electromask. They were the first ones to actually produce the wafer stepper, but because of the fact that it took them so long and that wasn't a priority of theirs, I left them in 1976, and then formed Micrel a couple of years later. So yes, I'm sure they regret a decision because they went out of business in 1981. The most successful wafer stepper company is called ASML. I think that's a European company, and they're doing very well. But they're the primary producers of the wafer stepper now is ASML. Are you familiar with them?
Yes, yes. They're very important. They build those very, very big machines that have special light that kind of burn the chip circuits into the material, right?
No, they image it.
Image it. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the product that I developed is the product that ASML now produces. Just for the audience to understand that what I did in 1974 when I developed the stepper, that is what ASML produces today.
I see. Yeah, that's extremely important for my understanding.
Yes. Oh no, it's probably the most important piece of equipment in making semiconductor companies today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it was my idea. It was my concept that ultimately now is being done by ASML, and they're one of the most important manufacturers of equipment for semiconductors in the world today.
Mm-hmm. My understanding is you need the ASML equipment to produce advanced chips.
Yes, that's what I developed back in 1974.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's some time back. Another questions. Can you take us back to the moment when you decided I'm going to find Micrel bootstrapped and do it my way? What pushed you kind of over the edge from being a semiconductor executive to becoming a founder? Because you had a disagreement on the technology, but I was wondering, was it control over values, over culture? Was it also a big driver for you?
I think more over culture. Um, uh, I don't know how much your audience knows about the early days of semiconductors, but Andy Grove, who ran Fairchild under Gordon Moore, he was kind of a hard person to work for. It's kind of like is it his way or the highway kind of a personality. Uh, so. The culture they thought because because Intel was so important and doing so well, most of these companies tried to emulate Fairchild's culture. I mean, not Fairchild. Am I saying Intel's culture? They tried to emulate that, and so it was kind of like not a very good company to work for because it was more of a pressure environment and more antagonistic, meaning they tended to invite antagonism and disruption, being very disruptive in your thinking, and so the culture that I wanted at Micrel was be more of a loving culture, more of a inviting culture. We had, as I said, the parameters, the cultures we had was honesty, integrity, dignity of every individual. No swearing allowed. And Intel, you could swear your head off. But in my company, we didn't allow any swearing, and no vulgar language was allowed. And we respected everyone, no matter if you were a janitor or if you were an executive, that you were treated equally. And then the last one was, if you make a mistake, correct it. In other words, do whatever it takes, no excuses, and have no regrets. Solve your problem. you be the man. You stand up. If you make a mistake, you fix it. And so that was the culture that we had at Micrel, which was unusual for any other semiconductor company, I think, in the world. We were so unique in that respect. But as a result, we had very little turnover. We had the lowest in the industry. And half of our employees that left the company came back. So we treated our employees as the most valuable resource that we had.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely, at the time, it was a new approach, but it has been learned by the company since, I do believe, especially for the ones who are heavily based on knowledge, that this is important. We already talked about leadership here. I want to ask something in the area of leadership versus burnout. The most founders we see today burn out in 3 to 5 years, some much, much earlier. You led Micrel for 37 years in a far harsher industry. How do so many CEOs burn out? And what are the 2, maybe 3 leadership habits or disciplines that allowed you to stay effective over nearly 4 decades?
That's a good question. So if you look at why people burn out, okay, is because they don't enjoy what they're doing. They hate to go to work. They hate to they have lost their in a divorce, or they're lost their relationship with people. With infighting, which is kind of endemic in semiconductors, a lot of infighting. Do you know what infighting is? Where you fight, you develop these silos, and you tend to protect. It's kind of like the battle between the good guys and the bad guys kind of thing. Is that infighting is the thing that causes animosity, and animosity is the thing that causes you to burn out. You're tired of fighting, okay? And as you know, nothing good comes from war. So if you're a top executive, you're not only fighting with your employees, you're fighting with your board of directors or with your investors. And so I think it's mainly you get tired of fighting. And so that's what causes burnout. And if you enjoy what you're doing, if you see a happy future, you're not going to burn out. You're not going to lose your way. You're going to stay engaged. And my employees love to get together. We love to have activities together. And we met together every Friday at 1:00. We met for an hour and a half, and we talked about, this is now the executives or the team leaders at the company met on a weekly basis on Friday at 1:00, and we spent an hour and a half just going over how things are going. We talk things out. We like working together. We didn't have these silos. We didn't have these barriers. And so there was a lot more of a friendly, let's work together attitude, as opposed to, let's fight among each other. And so I think it's that infighting is what causes burnout, because you're fighting your investors, you're fighting your board, you're fighting your employees, and you just get tired of fighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fighting is so energy draining, and the politics that come with it, it's no fun. You've been talked about, you've been writing The Essential Leader, and I was wondering, in The Essential Leader, you argue that the number one reason employees quit is fear-based leadership, which is currently still the modus operandi in a lot of investment banks, for example. Leaders who rely on power, intimidation, and ego. For founders listening right now, what are some early warning signs that they are slipping into fear-based leadership, even if they don't mean to?
Because they feel they're losing control. If you look at some of the battles and the wars around the world, it's the same thing. It's a matter of fear-based leadership. They want control. They want to be able to dominate and hold their position. They don't want to feel inclusive. And so, I don't want to get into the world politics, but for your audience that understands the wars that are currently around the world, they are fear-based, antagonistic. It's my way or the highway. I have to dominate. I have to be the one that says how to do it and when to do it. But that's not the way teams are. Team leadership is different than fear-based leadership. We want to work together and not fight as you would. We wanted to people to want to come to work. They want to help as opposed to they're fearful. They only do it because they don't want to lose their job or they don't want to lose their position in the company. And so they use fear as a way to intimidate and get what they want as opposed to people doing it because they love it and they want to do it as a happiness factor as opposed to a unhappiness factor.
Mm-hmm. You've been talking already about unhappy workers. In your essays and podcast, unhappy workers, it's not them, it's you. Interesting take. You say job satisfaction is primarily about loving your boss and loving what you do. How can investors or board members diagnose a culture problem quickly? And what question should they ask to see if the CEO is truly people-centric or just paying simply lip service?
Okay, so I'll start it by telling a story. Okay. The story is told about this couple, a husband and wife, that had to move because of their job. They had to move to this particular town where they were going to live. And so they went to the mayor and they asked the mayor, who's the best one to talk to about how the town is, what kind of a place it is to live. So the mayor said, well, there's this old man that's been here for 50 years and he's probably the best one to talk to. So the couple went and visited with the old man and the couple said, well, what kind of a town is this? And the old man said, well, what was the town like where you used to live? Oh, it's no good. The people are bad, and they really didn't like that town that they had lived in. So the old man said, well, this town's the same way. You'll find that it's just as bad as the town you lived in. So the couple went away unhappy. So then another couple came into town and same thing. They wanted to know how the town was. And so the mayor said, go visit the old man. So as they visit with the old man, he asked him, well, how was the town where you came from? Oh, we loved it. How were the people? Oh, they were fantastic. Well, how did you like your job? Oh, I loved it. And he says, well, we have the same thing in our town. It's a loving, very happy town. So the first clue is when you interview somebody is ask them how they like their previous job. How did you like your previous boss? How did you like your previous company? And if they say, oh, I didn't like it, I didn't like my boss, I would not hire them. Okay. If they said, oh, I love my boss, I love the company, I love where I work, I love my job, that's the kind of people you want to hire. So that the clue is when you interview your CEO or interview an employee, find out how happy they are. Find out what makes them want to get up in the morning and go to work. And if they're happy, then you have a long lasting employee or business. If they're unhappy, they're going to burn out. They're not going to last long.
Yeah. And would I learn from another interview, somebody who's specializing on burnouts, it's always toughest people that burn out.
So, so the happiness is the key. If you have a happy company, you've got a happy investor or happy employees. So if your employees are happy, then the investors are going to be happy. And so that's the way you actually qualify a good company is their happiness quotient. If you know what I mean by happiness quotient, you find out how happy the employees are that work for the company, whether it be the lowest employee or the top executive, as to find out how happy they are, because it's caused unhappiness causes burnout.
Totally. I, I was wondering, you also talked about tough things. Your core philosophy is tough things first. Do the hard, painful, necessary things before the easy ones. Can you walk us through a specific situation at Micrel, where you had to make an extremely unpopular or painful decision, maybe around layoffs, capital allocation, or strategic focus, and how that tough things first mindset guided you in this action?
So in 2002, we had the dot-com implosion. I don't know if your audience remembers that, but the dot-com era began in 1998 and accelerated. That was when Al Gore said he invented the internet, so there's a big rush to become a dot-com company, and I could see, but by 1999, I could see that was going to implode. In other words, that technology, that concept of getting rich quick and making a ton of money was just not practical. In 2002, when the industry imploded, I lost half my customers because some of them just went bankrupt. It was a really a difficult time. I mean, extremely difficult time. More companies went out of business in our industry in that time period than any other time in the history of the industry. So the dot-com implosion was the most difficult time for us. And losing half your customers, that puts a real strain on revenue. And then you have to decide, what do I do with my employees? It's not their fault. I mean, it's more of an industry issue. And so rather than doing a big layoff, we just cut back hours. In other words, we worked fewer hours. That was the first time in the history of our company that we lost money. We lost, out of the hundreds of millions of dollars that we had in revenue, we only lost $50,000. I didn't want to lose money because I had not lost money in a single year up until 2002 when we had the dot-com implosion. And so I didn't want to lose money, so I had to figure out how can I make help my employees with their job and still not lose a lot of money. So we just did, instead of doing a big cutback, we just did work shorter hours, and took more time off. And that really served us well because our employees knew that we loved them and we were caring about them and their families. Sure, they had to tighten their belt, because they had fewer hours they were working, and so less pay. But we told them how important it was for us to be together as opposed to strangle the company by laying off a lot of people. And as a consequence, we retained a lot of our employees, and we came out stronger in 2003 by just buckling it down and making sure that we took care of our people. I took the biggest pay cut of anybody. I made sure that my pay cut was 3 times that of anybody's. So I virtually took no money for a couple of years. And that really impressed our people. So that was a difficult time. But again, if you think about your people as opposed to yourself, that's what they like. They like to see that you are looking out for them and not out for yourself.
Mm-hmm. There's usually a decision going on here, bootstrapping versus venture capital. In Germany, especially, I think there are way more bootstrap companies than venture capital funded. I think mostly for the reason that there's not enough venture capital around, but that's a little bit different story. And when you've been talking about the dot-com bubble burst here, I had some déjà vu. I was old enough to have bought and sold a few internet stocks. EMTV, Pixel Park came to mind. They've been very, very big at the time. And I completely burned up during the dot-com bubble. But let us get into bootstrapping versus venture capital. You built a bootstrap semiconductor company in an area and region obsessed with VC money. From the vantage point of 2026, what did you gain by avoiding VC money, and what, if anything, did you sacrifice that founders should be aware of when they choose this path?
So the reason there are fewer venture capital is because there's less demand for it. If you look at the purpose of venture capital, it's to make a return of something like 3 to 10 times for your investors. That's how you get investors to want to invest in your fund, is by promising them a 3 to 10 times return. It's hard to find an industry that will give you that kind of return in a short period of time. And so the venture capital companies are finding it difficult to find startup companies that can offer that kind of growth. I think the dot-com implosion kind of soured them on these high-flying startups, as we call them. So the safest way, if you're going to invest in a startup with venture money, is to really be very, very selective, because 9 out of 10 startups fail within the first 3 years. That means that's a 10% chance of winning versus a 90% chance of failing. And so you don't want it's hard to find a startup where you have a 90% chance of winning as opposed to a 10% chance of winning. So there are angel investors that are willing to lend money, but they can't get 3 to 10 times their return. They got to look at less, so like maybe a 20% or 25% return, as opposed to a 3 times or 10 times. If you're going to start your own company, you look for ways to bootstrap it, either through angels or your family or your friends or your own resources. And that's the more favored way of doing it nowadays, because you're more likely to stick it out as opposed to being burned out. If you're the one that's on the hot seat, as you would, to make the company successful. So I get approached a lot by startups wanting to see if I'll help them, and I of course I haven't done much. I've done a little, but because it's difficult to be an investor without trying to get involved in the company. And I'm retired, and I write books, and I help at universities, and I don't know if I want to spend my time helping a company solve their problems. I want them to solve their own problems, and not me come in and have to help them. So that's been kind of my experience so far.
Mm-hmm. For our audience, if you're listening and you've experienced either a great or terrible CEO, send us a voice message, a comment, or a direct message on LinkedIn. What was the one behavior that made the biggest difference? We'll feature some, of course, anonymized of your stories in future episodes. One thing that was very distinctive from how you've been working, Ray, is Micrel was profitable in 36 out of 37 years and survived 8 major semiconductor downturns. If you had to distill that into something like a downturn survivor framework for today's founders and investors, what are something like the 3-4 principles they should do on their wall during the next macro shock, or maybe even on their forehead?
Well, if you think of in 37 years have 8 downturns, you can do the math on that. That's like every 3 or 4 years, you're going to have a downturn. You have to prepare for a downturn. it's like, you got to prepare to catch a cold. You got to prepare to get sick. You got to know that bad things are going to happen, and you have to prepare for it. And so it's kind of like, how do you stay healthy? You eat right, you sleep right, you exercise. That's the way you take care of your body. It's the same way you take care of your company. You make sure you're prepared for a downturn. Prepare. And that's kind of what we did in the 37 years I ran the company. When there was an upturn, we immediately began to prepare for a downturn. And that's the key, preparing for it, getting ready for it. That means you have to have the financial resources to hold you over. That means you have to have the right employees in place. You have to be prepared to not get sick. So that's what happens in a downturn is the company gets sick like you do physically. You know you're going to catch a cold. You know you're going to get sick, and you have to prepare for it. So if you want to minimize it, you have to eat right. You have to sleep right. You have to exercise. And that's the same way when you run a company. You have to eat right. You have to have the financial resources to hold you over. And so that's the key to surviving a downturn is you just know it's going to happen and you prepare for it.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering, when you talked about having the capital and having the employees, how lean should you go? Because there's an upturn and you're already preparing for the downturn, but you have to be able to run the company in both environments. How lean should you be? Should you have like the absolute minimum or like a buffer of 10, 50% of the headcount?
That's about right. You have to make sure your headcount is held to a minimum. So that, because it's going to happen, you're going to have a downturn, and so your employees know it. You prepare them, and so you don't get carried away with growing too quickly. Okay, that's the problem that venture capitalists, they want you to grow quickly, but to do that means you have to hire an inordinate number of people to do that. And that's dangerous because when the downturn comes, then you're going to have a lot of unhappy employees when they get laid off. So, you don't grow too fast. It's like, don't eat too much food. Don't exercise too much. You have to be moderation in all things. You have to be careful that you don't get ahead of yourself. As they say, getting over your skis. You don't want to do that. And so you want to keep the head count to a minimum. Do not grow too fast. Even though that's, by the way, one of the reasons I didn't want venture capital, because I didn't want them to tell me to grow faster, because I know what happens when I do. If I grow too fast, I'm going to go down too fast, because a downturn is going to happen.
I see. You've said in your new book that it can be used by investors as a checklist for assessing CEOs. If I'm a VC, I'm a corporate venture unit or family office looking at a founder, how do I practically apply your 10 essential skills and attributes during due diligence?
Well, we've been talking about that for the last half hour or so. You just have to realize how important your customer and your employees are. Customers are number one, but employees are also number one. So you got to treat your employees as well as you do your customers. And so the key here is to not get over your skis. The key is to keep your customers happy and you keep your employees happy. Happy employees mean happy customers. Happy customers mean you have happy employees. So you have to be moderate in the way you manage your resources in your company. We made sure that we had enough capital to ensure profitability for at least 6 to 9 months. So we couldn't grow too fast. We couldn't buy too many pieces of equipment, because we had to make sure that we could survive, we could last. You want to build a company that will last, not a company that will just hang in there. You want a survival company, not just a one that's just blowing the barn doors off. Take a company like Nvidia. Jensen Yang. He's done well, but I tell you, he's big. It's a big company, one of the largest in the country. But he runs the risk that if AI doesn't take off well, if it doesn't continue, it could be a .com implosion. And when it does, I guarantee you, Broadcom and Qualcomm and Intel and AMD and those companies, Nvidia, they're going to see that they're going to rue the day. I mean, they will not survive. And so trees don't grow all the way to the sky. I mean, it's at a point there's going to be a reckoning, and I think that AI has grown so fast and there's so many competitors that they can't sustain this forever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I totally understand. Originally, this was planned as one episode, but we're recording now for around 50 minutes now for half of the question. So I would just say thank you for this part. Right in the second episode, we'll get into how Ray led as legally blind CEO, why he banned swearing inside a Silicon Valley chip company, and the specific culture rules that kept Micrel turnover among the lowest in the industry. Ray, it was a pleasure to have you, and we'll be back for you and me in a few seconds, and for everybody else at the next publication of Startuprad.io.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.